Sacramento Bee. It's been a great week for writers. On Monday, we spent the whole 8 o'clock hour with the senior, I almost said elder, senior columnist at the Sacramento Bee, my friend Marcus Bertone. And
sorry, Marcus.
But yeah, right. Yesterday, we talked to former Sacramento Kings beat writer for the Bee, now with the Athletic, Sam Amick. So that's another Bee connection. And then right now, we will talk to the current Kings beat writer, as I do whenever I have a Bee guy on or an Athletic guy on. Journalism's a good thing. It's really important. And especially here locally, when you have, yes, sports is a great thing, but when you have COVID, when you have fires, when you have strong mayor, when you have all this stuff going on here locally, you got to have people to hold them accountable. Sacramento Bee has great deals. Go to sacbee.com. You can test it out for a month for, I think, $1. And then it's a couple cups of coffee after that per month to get all that access. And the guy who does all the Kings writing for us, or for them, for us, Jason Anderson joins us right now. Good morning, Jason. It's Dave and Jay. How are you?
Hey, guys. Good morning. Thanks for the plug there. I appreciate that.
Jason, you've been on before, but it's been a while. What were you writing about before you took over the Kings beat?
Crime in Stockton.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I had a lengthy sports background before that. It was kind of an interlude in my career for a little bit, just to fill a need at the paper down in Stockton on one of our bigger beats. So that was an adventure.
It's a beta question. I knew what you did, and I asked it for a reason. Because you are, I hope you take this as kind of a compliment. You're kind of a bull in a china shop when it comes to Sacramento sports media, and in the sense that you know how different cities have different ways and different protocols. And you piss people off sometimes, Jason. You do. But at the same time, also, you kind of, guy like me sits back and goes, and has to tip the cap sometimes, because you'll ask the questions, you'll ask questions sometimes that don't get asked a lot. And I've grown to, as you, and forgive, I hope you take this as a compliment, as you've kind of grown into the job over the last couple years and excelled at your work. I think there's a lot of people notice that, and I imagine, I'm guessing, I could be wrong, but I'm guessing some of that comes from the horrors that you've seen in real life prior to this job, and then now you're coming in and dealing with millionaires and billionaires, and you're like, I'm going to ask the question. I don't care. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think all of our experiences shape us, and certainly that was part of it. On a crime beat, you've got to ask very serious questions, very hard questions. You're questioning authority and, covering a lot of shootings and stabbings and officer-involved shootings that you have to get answers to. So I think all those things shape us. I certainly don't try to be a bull in a china shop. I think I ask questions pretty directly most of the time. I don't beat around the bush a lot. There are things we want to know. There are things people need to know. And I'm not shy about asking those questions.
So when you're asking those questions, you don't. There's not a thought in the back of your head where there's differences between some questions and others. I mean, that's really impressive if you don't. If it's just like an everyday question. Sometimes I feel like, I don't know, I know that the question I'm about to ask might be a sensitive question, but damn it, I'm going to ask it anyways.
Yeah, no, you do know, and you try to be tactful. When you're as you know, on radio, you're better at it than most. When you're kind of speaking out loud in a room with a bunch of people, sometimes things come out a certain way, and sometimes, but the question's the same. And we have to be able to talk about this stuff. So, yeah, you do know, and you try to be delicate, and above all, you try to be fair to people. And a lot of people listen to the question and think, don't go read the story. I've had people get upset with me about a question I asked, and I said, well, did you go read what I wrote? I mean, the point of the question is to get an answer and to elicit a response and to get a view into people's thinking. And then when you write it, that's where you're adding context and nuance and stuff like that. So, it's just part of the job.
Jason Anderson from the Sacramento Bee joining us this morning. Jason, let's kind of set the table. Obviously, Vlade Divac's out. as the head of the Kings front office. Joe Dumars in on the interim basis. But I want to go back to kind of what led up to Vlade being let go. There's reports saying that he had kind of, for lack of a better term, lost Vivek's ear as the season went on. Was there a certain point, you're in the locker room obviously a lot. Did you ever get to a certain point where you started to feel like that, Vlade is losing Vivek's ear? And did you kind of start to see the shift going towards Joe Dumars?
No, I can't say that we saw that in season. There really weren't signs of that. In fact, in the couple of weeks leading up to when this actually happened, I was being told that this kind of a move was not likely to happen. The team had, we all know what the situation was this season with the injuries and other issues, and then you get the coronavirus, so you've got massive financial losses on top of all the other uncertainty. So what I was hearing was that this wasn't likely to happen. Really, they had no choice but to kind of stay the course and see what this group could do together next season. But that shifted and began to change at some point. I can't pinpoint it, honestly, but I know that for us, it was basically the day before this went down that we started to hear that, wait a minute, this might actually happen. I think we all understood there was a possibility Vlade might just resign, and that's it. The pressure was building, the criticism was building. So that certainly was a possibility, but for it to go down the way it did, where there was he was leveraged a little bit, I didn't see that coming, no.
What do you mean leveraged? Just to clear that up.
Well, the offering, basically putting Joe in charge is what I mean. I think Vivek very well may have had a sense going into that conversation that it wasn't going to go well, and so that's what I mean by that.
Jason Anderson of the Bee joining us. Hearing a lot of stuff about Joe Dumars, and it's gone from wanting him in a Jerry West. Everything I'm hearing from the Kings is that all's well on the Western Front. Joe Dumars is going to be part of the search along with the 40 group they brought in, and they'll have Joe will not be the GM. But everyone around the league's telling me that there were issues over the previous few days that may have changed that tack. That Joe's time is not necessarily permanent. His days might be numbered there, and there's some noise and some smoke there. Are you hearing any of the same thing?
Well, I'm certainly trying to find out. I'm asking questions around the league. There's a perception that Joe may have wanted this job,
right?
And now there's a perception that I think some of this has been cleared up in the last 24 hours or so, last 48 hours maybe. But there was a perception that Joe might be the president of basketball operations, and then he'd be hiring somebody to answer to him. I haven't had a chance to talk to Joe, but it wouldn't be a big surprise if Joe felt that was going to be the case, considering that Vivek was handing him that position essentially when he made this proposal to Vlade. So it just created some confusion around the league about who's in charge, who's going to be making these decisions. And, it's just been a little bit messy over the first few days of the search. And I think that they're taking steps to clean that up. And I think that's really important before they get too far along in this process, that they purify it, I guess.
Yeah.
They just need to make sure they clean their house and they're ready to move forward with this and get the best guy out there.
It's tough from a reporter point of view because we have a duty to, and you're a real journalist, by the way, not me, but we both kind of have a duty to inform the fans as best as we can. And if you're going into something with your eyes closed or eyes open, that's an issue for the fans. You want this process, a very important process. But I've heard the same thing around the league that Joe, was planting quotes and stories and was campaigning behind the scenes and was trying to kind of put the word out there that he would be the guy in the end that would whoever came in would be answering to. And in fact, that was turning off a lot of clients, a lot of agents, a lot of people coming in. The problem is that as a default, I don't know Joe Dumars. I've never spoken one word to him, and I loved him as a player. I don't question, somebody's word unless I've been given a reason to question their word. And unfortunately, in Joe Dumar's case, this is a guy who has a documented history, at least in one instance, of doing some pretty goofy behind the scenes things that he got fined $500,000 for. So I'm wondering if that enters into your head as well when you're trying to get to the bottom of it, that we may not exactly be dealing with 100% truths here.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to, I without saying too much, I've got to say I have my hunches. I mean, we've all heard things that kind of make us wonder about how all of this went down, I guess. And to be fair to Joe, he's enormously qualified for this job if he wants it. But if that's the case, he needs to make himself a candidate. He probably needs to step out of the hiring process. And just be considered along with everybody else. So I think people are just looking for some transparency here, and the question of who's in charge is obviously enormous with all the candidates they're going to talk to, because a lot of them are not going to be willing to come to Sacramento if they're not getting total control of the front office and the roster. So that among my sources, that's been a big question, and including some people who are potential candidates for this job. One of them asked me directly, who's making this hire? Is it Vivek or is it Joe? And so I think, again, in the last 24 to 48 hours, they've released some statements and taken some steps to clear up that confusion a little bit. But that confusion is definitely out there.
Jason Anderson from the Sacramento Bee joining us this morning. Jason, something you pointed out on your Twitter a few days ago that I found interesting was the fact that King's COO Martina Kolakatranis will not be involved at all in this, which kind of seems, there's always things that are flown in and out, which definitely seems like it's a shift from the past. Is this Vivek just trying to basically clean house, or not clean house is the wrong word, but doesn't really want to hear from people that may have had influence in the past and is just trying to find a clean slate in this hire?
I don't know. I'd have to, you've got to be in the room with Vivek or get in his head to really know that. I can tell you the way that information came to us was I had written something and reported that sort of along these lines of asking who's in charge. I wrote something to the effect of people around the league still see this as Vivek and Martina's decision and not Joe's, at least in some circles. And so I got a nice phone call from the Kings telling us that with Martina, while she remains a trusted advisor and is important on the business side of things, she's not involved in basketball decisions.
As a matter of course, I hope you don't mind me asking, but when you wrote that, did you and Jason, you don't have to answer this, I'm just curious. When you wrote that originally, did you reach out to them for comment first before you wrote it?
I'd have to look at a call log and some text messages to see when messages were sent and when they weren't. On that specific question, I don't know that I did, but I had a lot of questions that went unanswered over a period of a couple of days. So I can't answer your question directly. I don't know if I specifically asked them. It was really, the line was just, I was writing what people around the league, what their perception is of who's going to be in charge and who's going to make the hire. So I don't know. I'm sorry. You stumped me a little bit because I'd have to go look at my text to see if that was a part of a text that I had sent over to them at some point.
Jason Anderson of the Sacramento Bee joining us. And Jason, that's really the biggest important question. It sounds like from what we've heard that Vivek will make the final decisions, that you're going to have Joe's voice. You're going to have the voice of whatever the executive committee is or whatever they hired. And it sounds like that's it, that you're going to have Joe's voice, the committee's voice. Maybe Ken Catnell will be in there, but it sounds like Joe and the committee and Vivek ultimately. And isn't the ultimate question here is Vivek Ranadive qualified to decide who the general manager should be, and should he be making this decision?
Well, it's a fair question, and it's a legitimate question. I'll let you answer it I'll let people answer that question for themselves.
I say no. I mean, I say no, and that's not a rip on Vivek. Here's the other thing. What would possibly qualify him? I mean, really, I talked about this yesterday, Jason. We use kid gloves with owners. Like, dude, you bought a team. You're in the public eye. God bless you. You saved the franchise. You said this is your team right on the floor. Like, Vivek has gotten love and deserved love in this community. The stuff they do off the floor is phenomenal. But they suck at basketball. And I fully believe that I think Vivek wants to win as badly as I do, and I'm a fanatic about this team. But I think as long as you're fair, as long as you're not personal, as long as you're not underhanded, your motives are bad, we all want to win. I don't know why there's anything wrong, why we, and I'm not talking about you, Jason, but why there's this stigma about treating Vivek fairly, like you would Buddy Hield or De'Aaron Fox or Vlade Divac. What has Vivek done basketball-wise to possibly, to remotely put him in a position where you'd say, well, you know what, at the end of the day, that's the guy I want making the call. Why is it so hard for us to say that?
Yeah, you raised some really good questions that I hope they're asking themselves. I don't know how to answer that other than to say, I mean, he owns the team. He should be involved in the process. Owners are always involved in the checks.
I agree. He's writing the checks.
So that's fine. But yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I mean, this is problematic on multiple levels so far. That's not to say they can't, kind of clean that stuff up and like I was saying earlier, move forward in a way that is healthy and results in the best hire. But so far, it's a little shaky, and I think there are some things that need to get resolved. And the point that you raised is a good one. It has to be something they're considering and talking about, even if they're not necessarily telling us about it. So, I mean, I think in the end, if you really parse through that, I think you come back to the question of how much influence is Joe Dumars going to have in the decision, and then even if they say it's Vivek's decision, is it really, or is he influenced in the end by what Joe wants to do? So, and then you get into like, okay, how long is Joe going to be here? Joe has an incredible resume, but if he's not long for the franchise, why is he making? Why is he going to make decisions and draft picks and trade guys maybe and re-sign or not re-sign guys? I mean, these are huge questions, and those are decisions that the new GM would want to make for himself. I mean, you could totally reshape the roster before you even make a hire, right? So some of this stuff they need to work through, I think, and figure out what the timeline is. There's no timetable now. I look at that a couple ways. One, you have to get it right. So on that front, I guess you have to take as long as you need to. But it also is, there are a lot of reasons to get this done before the draft if you can. I think that above all, hire the right guy. But two, there's a lot of reason for them and for this candidate to want this done before the draft and free agency begin, because there are a lot of important decisions that have to be made right around that time.
Jason, the candidates obviously are going to be the most intriguing thing. I mean, this thing is barely 6 days old, and I think we've heard 56 different names mentioned for this job. With that being said, and like I said, I know we're fresh into this, is there anybody you're hearing more than others that are starting to gain a little bit of steam?
Well, Scott Perry obviously is I think got the most traction right now. There are... Everybody likes Webster. I don't know. There are a couple names that are out there that may not be the most realistic, but you may have trouble pulling those guys away from situations. But it doesn't mean they're not on the wish list, and they're not going to be contacted, and that they won't be considered for the job. So. But Perry is one that everybody's talking about. I mean, this is on multiple fronts, multiple levels of the organization, and throughout ownership and around the league. Again, Bobby Webster with the Raptors would be incredible for the Kings if they could get him. Everybody's talking about Mike Zarin. No, I don't think he would leave Boston either. But I didn't just pull these names out of a hat. He's somebody that I think the Kings would be interested in. An interesting name I haven't reported yet that I want to learn more about is Eli Wittes, I believe. I might be mispronouncing the last name, but he's the executive VP of basketball operations with the Rockets. His name came up elsewhere yesterday, and it's a name I've heard as well. So, I think there are going to be a lot of guys that get added and subtracted to this list. They've now got the firm, as you guys referred to earlier, that's going to, I think, help them kind of go through some of these candidates and assemble a list of people they actually want to bring in for interviews or contact for permission anyway. So we'll see. But if the question is which name are you hearing the most, the answer to that is Scott Perry.
That's Jason Anderson of the Sacramento Bee. And as we let you go, Jason, I want to make a little I know we're not allowed to bet, so let's make a side wager, a nickel, because you were talking about Joe Dumars. Just my opinion. I'm just another guy. I would give better odds that Joe Dumars isn't even a part of the organization when it comes time for the draft. I would give better odds at that than I would be him being here at the start of next year.
Okay, even in an advisor role, you think?
No.
You don't see like a Jerry West kind of a role for him?
It might be, listen, I could see a thing where it's like this team has a weird way of like it's like the Nancy Lieberman effect. Like she was still a part of the team for like 2 years, but nobody saw her. Nobody saw her. Like, remember that? Like, Nancy Lieberman was not around at all, but anytime you asked, like, oh, no, she's... And she had... by the way, she had real legit... Like, I think her mother... Somebody was sick. She had real legit issues. But could I see a situation where, like, Joe Dumars hasn't officially been parted ways with, but he's not around? Yeah, but I'm saying, as far as the inner sanctum and decisions making, I just... Again, my opinion, I personally think they're going to have this front office in place by the time the draft hits, and I don't know how long this thing is going to go with him.
Well, I wrote today in my mailbag at sacbee.com, kind of raising the question of if you're going to go through this process in the draft and free agency and then hire a general manager, you're going to be handing him the coach Vlade hired and the roster Joe Dumars assembled, and he's going to have no cap space. And, things will get better after a couple years where they get out from under a lot of their contracts. So you can dangle that carrot, but I don't know.
Can't do it. You won't get the right person if you do that. People will just turn around and say bye-bye. Read his mailbag, Jason Anderson, today at sacbee.com. Get yourself the subscription, Jason. Appreciate the time. Great work out there. We'll talk to you soon.
Yes, sir.
All right,
take care.
You.